Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I got something super exciting because I got a new machine that I had to try out. So for this project I was trying to find something that would incorporate my new machine, and I think I found the perfect project for this because today we're gonna make a corset top, and that is actually the corset top that I released in my collection like a year ago or two, and I have not yet made here on my channel. So that is something that we're going to do today. The original design had a zipper here in the center front, but I'm not going to do that because I want to have a huge embroidered front section here, so obviously we can't have a zipper right through the middle, so I'm just gonna put it in the back. But other than that, it's the exact same design, and today we're gonna make this and make it look royal. So I think let's start embroidering. So my new machine is not gonna be the topic of today's projects, it's just something that I'm excited about because I just got it. And full disclosure, this is a collaboration which you will hear more from in the near future. I will do specific exclusive videos just about this machine and the embroidering and whatever else the machine can do, because she is powerful. Like, it's not only embroidering, you know, obviously she can like sew normally too, but it's just crazy what other things the machine is capable of, and I'm super excited to show you in future episodes. And yeah, if you don't want to miss out on that, hit that subscribe button down below because I will upload that very, very soon. And I can't wait to show you how exciting this new machine is and what possibilities basically it opened up for me. Today we're just going to use the embroidery functionality of my new machine and try it out and make something really, really nice and cool and special, I would say, with it. So I thought it would be the best thing to just go all out and use gold thread because I can and make this very nice ornament that we're gonna put right on top of the front section of my bodice. Isn't that stunning? Look at that. So I did two ornaments. This is the first one, and then I just did another one down here because I felt this was a bit bare, so I just put another one that I thought fitted the style, and I'm really happy about this. So then I cut it out. It was not perfectly centered, but that was totally fine because I anticipated that. And then I just repositioned my pattern pieces and cut it out then, so you can see it would have gone like this. And I'd fixed that issue, and now this is like completely centered, which I'm super excited about. And I think it looks stunning, especially with that upholstery fabric right here. It has these nice flowers and stuff on it. I think the gold just really makes it super, super unique. And I already cut out all of my other pattern pieces, and I just overlocked them because the fabric would just fray. You don't have to do that if your fabric doesn't fray as crazily. So basically this is what we're going to do. So it's like 4 parts. This up here will be gathered by elastic. So what is it called? Smocking, obviously. So we have a smocked area right here in the back panel, and I'm going to cut this in half and add a zipper here to the smocked panel as well. And then everything else is just going to be sewn together, and we're going to line this piece completely with cotton lining. I didn't like to use slippery lining like rayon. I just liked the behavior of the top with the cotton lining better, so that's why I am doing cotton lining for my project here. Obviously you can choose to use whatever lining you like, so if you are more comfortable with how rayon lining, for example, feels like conventional lining, go ahead and use that by all means, or use cotton. It really does not matter too much. So let's get started. Actually, the first thing that I will be doing is smocking this back panel right here. So I think it's the best to smock all in one go so that everything is parallel, and then cut it in half. Like, we're going to, you know, do a fixing stitch on each side before we cut it in half, but I think it's just the neatest so that we all have everything spaced out exactly the same when the zipper goes in. Then it's just a matter of perfectly positioning the zipper, so good luck. In my pattern piece, there will be lines over lines over lines. So use the ones that your size marks, and I think they're spaced out a centimeter. So my fabric is not the best to see markings because it's just all colors. And then I like to just draw it over to the other side, which is a tiny bit easier because it's white or more light that side. And we're gonna smock by machine. So what I like to do best is to use the elastic thread for my bobbin thread, and I found that my machine can actually machine thread the bobbin thread, if that makes sense, like the spool. It can do that by machine. I've heard that a lot of people do that by hand as well because their machine can't do it. That really depends on your machine, so I hope you can do it by machine. And we're just going to sew along these lines, and that's it. That's how you smock. Okay, that should be good enough. And now I'm just gonna sew along these stitching lines. So what I did now was to stitch next to the center of my panel, and then instead of cutting it there, I just folded it and stitched at 1 centimeter. So I'm going to cut now, hoping that everything stays as secure as I intended. Like this. Now I want to iron the seam allowance to the sides. And with the center back now closed like this, I can put the zipper here, which is a metal zipper like this, which can be parted down here. I have to go 1 centimeter higher because there will be the seam allowance, and shorten the zipper to also 1 centimeter lower right here than the edge. So I have to shorten until here. Okay, with the zipper now shortened, I can put this on the wrong side where I ironed the seam allowance open, and as you can see, it fits really nicely now inside the piece. So what I want to do now is to pin this in the middle of my piece. Okay, and what I want to add is 1 line on each side of the center back. So I think I'm gonna stitch at 1 centimeter. I will try to be as neat as possible once it goes to this spot up here. It might be wise to open the zipper once you reach maybe here, and then you open it so that you have like not a bumpy surface like this, so that this is out of the way. Okay, that is what it looks like. It's not perfectly symmetrical, but I can live with that. And the last step is to open up the center back seam again. And that is the outcome. Okay, now with the back done, that is basically the only more difficult thing. We can start to put our panels together, and I'm going to do this however I wanted to do my dirndl. So I forgot midway through, so that's why I'm saying that. But that means that I'm going to leave my side seams open because that is the easiest method if you have a lining with these like super narrow shoulder straps. So that's what we are going to do. You'll find notches that mark the stitching line of each panel right here somewhere, and then here also for the back panel you're going to find the notches up here. So what we're going to do is put right sides together, sew until the notch, and we also have to put our straps together and iron open. So let's go ahead and do that. Here I'm going to cut towards the end of the stitching line, right where the notch is, so that the seam allowance can lay openly while the other side of the seam allowance lays towards the side panel. And we're gonna need that once we put the lining in place anyways. So now this can be ironed flat, and the other side as well. And now we're gonna leave this open. So let's put the back panel onto the side back. We're gonna start at the waistline, and then we're gonna find some notches in the back here as well until where our panel needs to go. And we're also, same as with the front panel, only going to stitch until the notch, but we can stitch all the way down to the raw edge at the waistline. Same here, I'm going to cut into the notch towards the stitching line for ironing, and I'm only gonna cut like into the side panel, not into the back panel. So this is still intact, it's just this one. And the seam allowance here, I will be ironing towards the side back because we're going to have everything lined except for the back because of the smocking. So this needs to face into the side back, otherwise it's not gonna work out with the lining. And this is what the finished back will look like. I really like it. The fabric is just also very gorgeous. So now we can put the right sides of our shoulder straps together and close the shoulder seams. Iron this open. Okay, now that this is done, we can do the same for the lining. The only thing that the lining doesn't have is the back panel right here, so we're just gonna close the front dividing seam and the shoulder straps. And that's all that we're gonna do for the lining for now. Okay, so the lining is now done, and I also added this really nice cotton trim to the neckline of my fashion layer. This is very optional. You can choose to decorate your neckline or any other perimeter of your piece however you like. If you want to do so, add it now before we add the lining, because otherwise you're not gonna be able to reach that seam anymore. So the next step is to fuse the lining and the fashion layer together, and we do that by putting right sides together and matching up all of the notches and seams, and we're going to sew around the neckline all the way down towards the notch right here. And this is going to match up with the corresponding notch here in the lining as well, sewn like this. And then we want to match up. You can see I cut towards the stitching line here, so this is where my notch is, right here. And that I want to match up with my lining where the notch is here, onto like at the stitching line, so right here. Let's also match up all of the other seams. And notches, so this one right here also gets matched up with the notch that we put into the front piece. So that is the neckline all pinned on. And while we're at it, we can also close the waistline. So now I'm just going to also line up all of the seams at the waistline, and also in the back piece we can do that. Same as with up here. We only want to sew until the dividing seam here, so we're not going to sew any further because we will fold the lining like this on the other side and stitch it in place there. Like this, and now we can sew around everything apart from the side seams in the front and the side seams in the back. And we're not gonna touch this seam here as well. So we're starting to sew from the notch here, sew all the way around the neckline, start at the notch on the other side, and then we can close the waistlines. You don't want to close the armhole actually, because otherwise you're not gonna be able to turn everything right sides out, as the straps are very, very small, so you're not gonna have a good time doing that. That's just something that I wanted to mention. Probably if you do this in a very thin fabric, it should be fine, but I'm not gonna attempt anything like that because I have a very thick fabric. I'm using upholstery fabric, so it's a heavyweight fabric. That's very nice for a corset top, but for turning stuff right sides out through very thin straps, not doable. So anyways, now that we have everything apart from the armhole sewn together, we can turn everything right sides out as much as possible. And for the armhole, we're actually just going to iron the seam allowance towards the inside and top stitch it. Or you can also, if you want to, do a blind stitch or anything else that you feel comfortable with if you don't want to have the visible stitches. And I think I'm also going to top stitch the hem just for everything to lay neatly, as I don't want the lining fabric visible on the right side here. It's just pulling on the fabric still, so we need to kind of like cut into the seam allowance to release some tension. So let's turn this wrong sides up so that I can iron this nicely. I only want the ditch of the seam visible on the lining side. And I think I'm just going to add some pins in here to keep it where I ironed it. And then I'm gonna add top stitches at the very end once the side seams are closed to fix everything permanently like this. I think this looks really, really neat. And then let's do the same for the neckline. For the neckline, I think it's smarter to iron from the right side because we have the trim here. If you don't have the trim, you also want to iron from this side and make sure that the ditch of the seam is only visible on the wrong side of the fabric. Right here at the notch, you want to release the tension by cutting towards the stitching line here. So once you turn this right sides out here, it turns nicer, and otherwise, let's compare it to this side, there's just a lot of pulling, especially here on the lining. You can see it, like a lot of pulling. And then here on this side, after I cut into the seam allowance at the notch, it just lays flat because the seam allowance on the inside can just open up like this. So let's also cut towards the stitching line here at the notch, and now it lays flat. And here at the back piece, you also want to cut towards the stitching line at the notch, and you want to cut right towards the stitching line because this whole piece gets flipped underneath the back piece. And it's gonna lay like this in the very end, but one step at a time. So the first thing that we're going to do is iron. And here we have to cut towards the stitching line in order to be able to flip everything around and then have a neat turning point here that will get flipped towards the inside here. We also want to iron the ditch of the seam towards the inside here at the hem, and we can continue this line throughout the back piece and end this at the zipper like this. And here everything needs to face inside the lining, and the seam allowance of the lining also gets folded over and then pinned along the stitching line of the back dividing seam. And now I think it's a good time to just top stitch the neckline very closely to the edge right here to fix all of the things that we just ironed and pinned and all of that in place so that we can take out all of the needles. What I like to do before that is to check, once I close the center back, if everything still lines up. The waistline looks okay-ish. You can try, if you have any weird wobbly seams, to just let out a little bit of the seam allowance here in the waistline and even it out that way, which I will do like this. And then for the neckline, it's important to me to just get this part up here nice. I think this is totally okay, and I can go ahead and stitch around the neckline to fix everything in place like this. And also here at the back dividing seam, I also top stitched very closely to the edge in order to catch the lining that is folded towards the inside and prepared and pinned in place while doing so. Now for the strap and the arm's eye, we're going to just iron the seam allowance towards the inside on both the fashion layer and the lining. How we're going to do that with the lining I'm going to show you in a second, so just iron the seam allowance towards the inside for now. Now for the lining, I like to keep it with the lining side up so that I see, once I flip the seam allowance towards the inside, where it's going to end up, because I want this to stay also only visible on the lining side. So I'm folding and adjusting according to my piece, and fold in a tiny bit more or less or whatever, so that you get like the neatest result in the end. And now with all that pinned in place, I can go ahead and from the outside sew very closely to the edge in order to still catch the folded lining and to fix everything in place right here. And as you can see here, this is what it will look like from the inside. So I caught it like right next to the fold line, and you barely see it on the outside. Depending on what thread you use, obviously, you can also make it very visible if you want to. And now we're going to close the side seam. What I want to do before that is just overlock the lining layer and the fashion fabric all together here, and then also on the back piece. And now with these two layers fixed together, we can finally close the side seam. So let's just put right sides of back and front together and close right along here. Let's iron the seam allowances open. And last but not least, top stitch the waistline so that we can finally get rid of these needles that have been bothering me for a long time now. And that's it already for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did so, please leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring the bell so you'll get notified every time that I post. I post on Sundays, so keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, if you haven't already, go ahead and check out my social media and give me a follow there. I post loads of behind the scenes and reels about tips and tricks all around my projects, so if you're interested in that, go go ahead and follow me there. Links are down in the description below. The most direct way to support me and keep videos just like this one coming is to head over to my Etsy shop, where you can find tons of patterns. I think I have over 70 now, so that's crazy. Been doing that for 2 years now, thanks to you guys. You will also find the pattern for this top that you saw in today's video through the direct link in the description box down below, so thank you so much for your support. Thank you also to my channel members. You can get exclusive benefits if you become a member of my channel, and obviously also directly support me, so that's really, really nice. So thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you next Sunday. Bye guys!